Hello? I can't hear you. Uh,
Okay, can you hear me
oh,
now?
no. Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay, well, this is the first one of these I've done with somebody. So, and right now it's being recorded as well as broadcast on YouTube. So, my name is Hans Peter Meyer, and I'm welcoming Melissa Bloxham as my guest tonight on this regular series of conversations called Men and Women Talking About Sex and Love. So thanks for joining me, Melissa.
Thanks for having me.
And you and I have had lots of conversations like this. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
Nice to be doing it again. I don't think things have changed a lot in that couple of years, from what I see out there and what I hear from the men and women I work with.
Mm.
Um, I felt like I wanted to start up this series of these questions again because of that, because I just see a whole lot of people quite frustrated, especially in the dating side, but also in marriages, just not knowing what to expect, maybe from themselves as much as from anybody else, but certainly not happy with how things are out there in the world
Hmm.
when it comes to love, sex, dating, marriage. How do we be together as men and women? I don't know. What do you think?
As far as like if things have changed or what's going on out in the world.
Both.
Um, I mean, a lot has changed in my world, in my views in the last 2 years.
Hmm.
Um, that has a lot to do with somebody very close to me passing away. Um, that's affected the way that I see relationship and the way that I look at sex and the way that the direction of the conversation that we're going to have. Um, my viewpoint has changed. So, like, it would have been a radically different conversation 2 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, and as far as what's going on between men and women, I think there's a lot of just, I think everybody is not understanding each other and or is not willing to actually listen to what the other party is saying.
Hmm.
There seems to be, yeah, just a lot of I don't know, manufactured divisiveness even. I'm not sure um what that is, if it's manufactured or if it's authentic.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I too have had somebody very close to me die in the last 6 months, and it's shaped. Well, I think about him every day,
Hmm.
and he and I used to have a lot of conversations about men and women and sex and love.
Hmm.
He was I think 11 years older than me. He was somebody who um, he worked as a counselor. He helped a lot of people, a lot of men, a lot of women, a lot of kids, a lot of couples. Um, he had a real playfulness to him,
Hmm.
um, but also a real a super big heart.
Hmm.
And I introduced myself today as Hans Peter Meyer, and that's how you would know me. But since we last spoke, I got myself ordained because I wanted to actually be part of people's wedding experience. Really, what I wanted to do was be part of shaping their expectations around marriage and stuff like that. So, in the process of
Hmm.
getting that accreditation, I became a reverend. So now I often call myself Reverend Hans or Rev Hans, partly because as a bit of a provocation, like what would people might think, but also to remind me to be
Hmm.
reverential. Like
Hmm.
I just love that. Oh, like how can I be more reverential here? And I guess when I think about things like sex and love in my life, I know that I took both of them for granted and was less than reverential
Hmm. Hmm.
many times. Um, and that was part of a conversation that I would have with my friend who died, my wise friend who was very interested in the kinds of things that I was learning in terms of the stuff that I, whatever you want to call it, the sexual yoga or the sexual polarities work or
Hmm.
whatever. Um, anyway, I think about him a lot, and I think what he left me with was this feeling of, okay, how do I stand on your shoulders? Like you gave me so much. Um,
Hmm.
how do I honor that? Because you're
Hmm.
not here anymore to do that. So what can I do that might be a approximation or something similar to what you might give to situations?
Yeah.
So I don't know if
Well,
you want to talk about it, but I'm really curious about this experience of death in your life and how it's changed how you think about or talk about or do sex and love. And I don't expect you to do that, but if that's something you're interested in talking about, I'd love to hear about it.
okay. I think it will probably get woven into the
Okay.
answers or the discussion about the topic that you have for this uh, conversation. Um, it was my sister, and she was a couple years older than me.
Hmm.
Um, she was 45 when she passed, and that was just in December of last year, so it's coming up on a year for me. So it's a little tender right now.
Mhm.
Um, her disease was a result, most likely, um, of like she passed away from cancer. So the type of cancer, it was related to sex
Mhm.
and reproductive organs, and yeah, so I think uh just like you, I'm attempting to honor my sister by bringing awareness to as many people as I can about being highly intentional with that in your life.
Okay. So what I had invited you to talk about tonight were the 4B movement that's come out of Korea, and the
Hmm.
incel movement that's, as far as I know, is a largely North American phenomenon.
Hmm.
Um, so what I understand, and I don't know a lot about either one of these movements, but on the surface of it, what I know about the 4B movement is B is a homonym or a prefix in Korean for no. So it's women deciding to say no to childbirth, to marriage, to dating, to sex.
Hmm.
And the incel movement being almost its opposite, which is, again, I don't understand it very deeply, but men who are involuntarily celibate, men who would like women to say yes to at least having
Hmm.
sex.
Hmm.
I think it's interesting, and it came to the 4B movement came to my attention because after the Trump election, all of a sudden the interest and the searches and the in the states around 4B spiked, um, seeming to signal women feeling like they needed to find some way of collectively saying no to what seems like a misogynistic, or anti-woman, to use that
Hmm.
word,
Hmm.
agenda on the Trump side. I'm curious about how, and I know you had given me some references around a conversation about the incel movement, which, to be honest, I hadn't followed up on. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm curious about what your first thoughts are on either one of these, given the current context of where we're at
Well,
socially, but also what you might be seeing in the work that you do or that you used to do. And
I don't really follow American politics that strongly, so I don't know exactly what's going on. I've just heard little, whispers here and there that my understanding is that it's mostly Democratic females that are saying that they're going to stop having sex. That's what I heard, that they were going to stop having sex in protest to, I don't know, men voting for Trump. Is that what the 4B movement is in the States, or?
well, I think it's more than that. I think so. I think that's that. I think that's the fear. That's certainly men's fear is that, oh my God, women are going to radicalize by not having. They're going to deny us. They're going to organize to deny us. They're already saying no too much as far as I can concerned, and so now they're going to organize, and I won't get sex anywhere. Um, the Korean movement is interesting because it's not just sex, although it's part of it, but it's like no
Mm,
dating, no marriage, no
mhm,
child rearing. So we're, basically we're not going to be your, we're not going to carry your children. We're not going to look after your homes, cook your meals. We're not going to do all the things that were traditionally associated with being a woman in that culture. And my
mhm,
sense is that after the kinds of things that were being said by on the Republican side of things and their fellow travelers, um, that a number of women just got, well, they were just, it's time to say no. It's like because of the the argument around taking away abortion rights and
mhm,
not letting, like, trying to restrict movement of women who are carrying, who are pregnant, and basically a whole lot of things that look like they're going to limit women's freedoms, some women were responding by, well, I'm just going to start saying no. And there's an example in Korea of what that might look like. And as some writers have pointed out, like, this is not a new idea. That Aristophanes 2,500 years ago wrote a play, Lysistrata, where at that time the Athenians and the Spartans had been in this long war, and the women organized to say, we're sick and tired of this war, and we're not going to have sex with you until you guys stop fighting.
right.
Um, so the idea is not new, but it's rare. And when I work with young women who are dating, there seems like, when I work with women who want this thing that called love,
Mhm,
and because of how we are, when we're attracted to each other, when she opens her heart, she also opens up her body, and he often doesn't recognize what he's doing. I don't often recognize what I'm doing when I'm entering that body, that there's actually an open heart wanting to receive me in a fuller way. And I just see so much heartbreak on the women's side. When women come to me and say, oh, I'm starting to date somebody who I'm really attracted to, I'm just being really cautionary. Like, in my experience, the more I can slow down around that impulse to, like, let's have sex
mhm,
now, the slower it goes, actually, the better things go.
mhm,
The whole culture is saying more sex, more sex, more sex is good sex. But my experience is, the slower I go before having sex, the better the sex is, but definitely the better the relationship is, the more opportunity there is for love to grow, rather than something else, which ends up not feeling very much like love. So
mhm.
when I started seeing this spike of interest in the 4B movement, to me it made a lot of sense. I mean, I wasn't saying to women stop dating and stop having children and stuff, but I certainly felt like, the more we can slow down, run any of this stuff, the better it is for all of us.
Yeah, I think that, like, to me it sounded like it was a vengeful choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is actually a healthy choice, for the women especially, because we fought for freedom. We fought for a lot of freedoms, and we got our freedoms, and then I think we took it too far, and we stopped thinking about our responsibilities. I know in my 20s, most of my girlfriends were getting drunk every weekend and hooking up and being quite frivolous with their reproductive parts. And I don't know a lot of people, a lot of women now that don't have some sort of health issue there, down there right now. Um, I think that women need to start thinking as much about their reproductive rights as they need to think about their reproductive responsibilities to themselves and to their families, you know, their mom and dad, uh, to their future children, to the fact that maybe they won't have any children if they don't slow down with, you know, the freedom that we have. I'm not a conservative type of person. I'm a health conscious type of person. I'm like I'm thinking about how can I live the longest joyfully and have as much sex as I can in a healthy way.
Mhm.
And I think that the 4B movement is good for everybody. And if you're a good man, you're glad. You're breathing a sigh of relief. You're going, oh, thank God we don't have to worry about the women right now. Like we can all just relax and everybody's just going to take a breather. And there's, you know, there's not going to be the passing of diseases and or unwanted pregnancies. Everything's going to slow right down and we can actually start to look at it in a healthier way.
So you've had a pretty hard confrontation with some of the consequences of not living in a healthy or a conscious way with your sister's death. Um,
Hmm.
I think for a lot of us men, it's pretty easy for us to not pay attention to consequences. You know, I mean,
Hmm.
in my lifetime, there was the you know there was the scare of AIDS, which had an interesting and chilling effect on carefree sex for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a
yeah.
time when, if I was gonna, I remember starting a relationship, in or after, in around that time, and it was like, okay, well, we're not gonna have sex until we are both tested. Like that was a real damper, like to think that having sex could kill us.
Yeah, exactly.
But that seems to that passed for it seems like it's passed for most of us heterosexual men, certainly.
Hmm.
Um, I don't hear men talking about that or being concerned about that. Not the way it was 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. I mean, one of the things that you said you're not conservative, you're concerned about health. I find myself, I guess my concern is my spiritual health. The times when I have, for whatever reason, slowed things down, and in one relationship, a beautiful relationship, there were, we each had children, and I was aware that what we were doing was affecting her kids and my kids, and
Hmm.
I wanted it to have the best possible effect, like that me being involved with her would be a good thing for her kids, and for my kids, and that how I would do that would model to my daughters how a man might be, and
Hmm.
perhaps would model to her sons how a man might be. So I felt, like there was a lot going on there, and I was trying to be a little more than my erect penis.
Hmm.
Later on, and years later in a different situation, I was a lot less conscious and a lot less careful, um, and the consequences were not, to my knowledge, were had nothing to do with our physical health, but they certainly had to do with my spiritual health, and they had to do with the spiritual health of the woman who I fell in love with. That I would just,
Hmm.
because I was in a rush, because I wasn't paying attention to things that I had paid attention to before. I set us on a course for unhappiness, and at that time and this time in my life, it's something that I am putting energy into changing, and that feels good. But again, when I talk to young men or young women who are dating, I always just caution, like, just slow down, like whatever you can do to slow down, everything will be better,
Hmm.
and there'll be a lot less heartbreak and a lot more open-heartedness, and that's what I want to support and be part of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
when
I
I
don't know what it's like to be a man, so I don't know how that feels to have to slow down. I know how it feels to be a woman. It feels like there's more interest when it's slower.
It feels like there's more interest on my side. If things are slower, then you're getting more of my interest, you mean? Or
No, I'm
oh,
more interested.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you
Hmm.
once talked about, every woman is like an island that we can be exploring.
Yeah.
And lots of times we're not interested in exploring the island. We just kind of want to do a quick circumnavigation and
Just want to conquer the island and then move
conquer the
on.
island and move on. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I was speaking to a woman a little while ago, and well, it was painful to watch the arc of what became a very short relationship arc. She'd met a really, for all intents and purposes, a good man, a very conscious man,
Hmm.
but he was not able to hear her. He was so, and one of the attractions that he had was that he was very decisive, and he had a vision, and a lot of it was really appealing. And so she was ready to surrender to him before before what? I don't know. But what came clear really quickly was that he was so focused on where he was going that he couldn't slow down, and he couldn't hear her, and if he felt her at all, it was with frustration.
Hmm.
And I don't say that as a judgment. I mean, it is a judgment, but it's a judgment. I've been there. I know that. As she was talking, it just felt too close to home. So when I hear, again, I don't know a whole lot about the incel movement. I could laugh. I could make a joke and say, well, almost every man I've ever met, myself included, was involuntarily celibate. I mean, we think we want a whole lot more sex than we're ever able to have. And so I find it kind of laughable that there's actually men who are organizing around this principle. But I think it goes it goes to, at least in my mind, it goes to this expectation that we have that the world owes us something, and one of those things that it owes us is access to your body.
Mm-hmm.
And where did that idea come from? I mean, it's not that long ago that we did have, if we were married, we had, there. It's in living history, like it's in my lifetime that there were still states in the United States where you couldn't, it was legal to rape your wife. Like you could not be charged with rape.
Mm-hmm.
So we had undeniable access to your body, and so now some of that has changed, and I can't do that anymore. Not legally, but part of me still wants that. Or there's enough of us men who think that we still deserve that. And I get it. I mean, I get it from, like, I know how my body feels. I know that my that I can understand some of that, righteous wanting. But as soon as I think about the women I know, my friends, my mother, my sisters, my
Mm-hmm.
daughters, my now young granddaughters, I mean, that kind of attitude has no place in that world. Like, I just really hope that that those women never have to deal with that kind of attitude any more than they've had to already.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't remember what was the post that I had uh shared that you were
well,
commenting on.
you had listened to a conversation or a podcast or something, and somebody was interviewing somebody about the incel movement, and there were some insights there that you thought it would be worth, like, that it wasn't as black and white as you. There was something else going on there that would be worth looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'm remiss in not having followed up with that. Um, in the terms of the work that I do with men, I if a man is married and his wife or his long-term partner isn't wanting to have sex with him, my encouragement to him is to to turn the attention to himself, to look at where, how can he hold himself better? How can he deepen himself as a man? Basically, do his own work, because I don't know what's going on with her, just as I didn't know what was going on with my girlfriend or my wife. I mean, they could tell me things, but I don't know what it feels like to be in their body,
Mm-hmm.
and I would just have to trust that me going to a place of neediness was not the answer. Neediness or demand, like, that was not going to get me what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted.
Yeah.
um, and I was talking to a colleague a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about the importance of communication, and I always have to add a caveat there that it's not just the talking, it's how I hold my body, it's how I breathe. Like, that's part of how I communicate with you and you to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not paying attention to when you're closing and when you're opening, then my words are not really all that important. And your words are not necessarily telling me all of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the need for pay as we get closer. And I love the word intimacy when we get into it, and we get away from, well, intimacy just means having genital contact. It's actually like so much more than that. And
Hmm.
the more I can, as a masculine identified man, the more that I can facilitate intimacy that isn't overtly sexual, the more that sexual energy moves, and not in ways necessarily that I can understand or anticipate or even want, but so how do I facilitate intimacy? And one of the first things is to just learn to be really patient and listen.
Well, and one of the things I know for me that would create a feeling of attraction and intimacy and relationship is when not only are you listening and you're patient, you're actually remembering what I said. So if I share something and then it's remembered, and then there's an act of service because of something that you remembered, that's attractive. Like that's sexy. It's not even like it's, it's funny when men try to figure out all the things because it's really quite cerebral. It's not, it doesn't have a lot to do with the body as much as it has to do with um, remembering things, acting on them, bringing awareness to, sitting with, um, adventures. Uh, I don't mean like big grand adventures. I just mean, like let's get in the truck and let's go up the mountain and, take you out of your responsibilities for a little bit. Um, yeah, it's interesting trying to or watching men trying to figure out what to do when it's actually it is if you're like a good healthy man, it's actually quite natural. You don't have to try the things that are attractive, and if you're trying, then like a woman can feel that too. If there's like a intention behind it, oh, I'll get sex if I do this. Mm-mm. No, you won't. If you do it out of joy and wanting to do that for her, then it's like, mm. But again, like there's so many other things going on for a woman. And this was actually one of the things that I wanted to really talk about. We kind of, I said this was the topic that I wanted to talk to you about, and then you said let's talk about 4B. I think this can fit in here.
Hmm.
Um, I brought up the subject or the possibility of taking responsibility for your partner's sexual health. So actually, as a man, I think it's like a female's reproduction or reproductive parts require a lot of maintenance. It requires a lot of care. It requires a lot of action. And especially when you get into the later years, like 40, 45 and onward, um, you have to start doing things differently because your hormones are starting to uh, change. Let's call it. And so, I mean, the other day I brought that up to my partner and I said, I think I would appreciate it if you cared about my sexual health as much as I do.
Hmm.
And you ask me what is going on down there often,
Hmm.
because that actually affects me and my mood more than you even know. Like if there's something going on down there, it's uncomfortable, or there's, you know, just differences even, it's like it's on my mind. And then if you don't, and then I'm kind of like shy or embarrassed or whatever it is to say it because it's so like, well, that's out of nowhere. But if you're actually taking on the responsibility like it's your own, like it's a little animal, like, okay, what does it need? What can I do? Do I have to do anything differently when we're having sex? Is there something that is bothering you, you know? Um, it's actually quite profound if your partner is caring about it as much as you are. And it can even turn into like an intimate thing in its own way. So,
I go back to your analogy of the island to be explored.
mm,
Um, I had a colleague say to me one time, and not about me personally, but as a man, your most women, and she works a lot with, she's a doula and a somatic sex worker, so she works a lot with lots of women. She said most
mhm,
women that she works with experience your erection as a demand.
mm,
And I know from my side, I don't, I mean, I get it,
mm.
but I also experience my erection as this joyful opportunity to have some fun. And I don't get it why you don't want to be there. Um,
Well, I'm going to interject. I think I can see that. I experience an erection as desire, and I read somewhere the other day that women are turned on by their man's desire. Like that's one of their bigger turn-ons is when their man has desire flowing to his body. So,
so, but
go on.
if I'm always in a place of desire, but I'm not really in a place of exploring you or of paying
Hmm.
attention to your animal body, um, to and because my as a young man, my physiology is pretty simple. Um, I remember once we had one of these conversations, and one of our guests, basically was asking for the how-to manual. Like I don't want to have to like think about this stuff all the time. I just want the manual. And when we're young, we get into a habit. Certainly, as young men, we get into a habit of I'm hard, she's wet, let's go. And it doesn't take very long, at least in my experience, it doesn't take very long for any relationship where if that's where I'm coming from, then the no's start coming. Then, oh, I'm not interested, or this is not pleasurable. Well, rarely is it said it's not pleasurable for me, but the no's, the
Hmm.
declining, and then the scratching my head, like, wow, well, it's wasn't that long
Hmm.
ago that you were really into this.
Hmm.
And and I don't know, any men who have experienced anything otherwise. That just seems to be our pattern. Things are early days of romance and arousal. I don't need to know about your body. I just need to know the basic signals, and my desire is enough for you to desire, and let's go. And then when things get a little more tricky, then because it's too much work on my part to actually figure
Mm-hmm.
things out, or you're shy about saying no or afraid to say no, things close down.
Mm-hmm.
So let's so the 4B. So okay, there I am, involuntarily celibate, and then there's a bunch of women who are actually organizing to say no to fulfilling the functions of what I understand to be what women do, which is have sex with me, have my babies, get married to me, date me. I mean, most of the guys, I think all the guys that I've ever worked with are not quite that primitive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at some level, there's that there's a resentment there. If I'm not getting my, because we're also so limited in how we've been raised to experience ourselves emotionally. So much of our emotional life is tied up in having sex, being received sexually, and we don't know what to do about that. And we're not talking to each other very much about that, except to complain or maybe organize as incels. Maybe, I don't know. But we're not asking, whoa, like, what do I need to know about her body?
Mm-hmm.
How can I change how I talk? I mean, that's actually seen as a, like, well, you're just being a pussy, or you're the feminization of masculinity, and those are things that are real for young men. They're like, hallelujah. you
Mm-hmm.
know I'm starting to understand a little bit more about what's happening in the female body, and I really actually want to make space for that and learn more, because I like what happens. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to get the sex that I would have wanted when I was 10 or 20 or 30 years younger. It's I get to experience a part of you that is really new and different
Mm-hmm.
from how I
Mm-hmm.
experience life. And so I'm starting to like explore that island, and I'm finding things that I never imagined I'd find.
I bet.
Well, the woman I love said to me, and we haven't been together for a long time, and she said to me the other day, like, you are more reliable now than you ever were when we were together. And I know that that's a good thing. Like, for her
Mm-hmm.
to feel that, I know, like, that she opens. She's not opening sexually; she's opening another part of herself,
Mm-hmm.
and I experience that as incredibly nourishing.
Yeah.
Um, and the times when I have in relationships been interested in knowing more about, your monthly flow, uh,
Mm-hmm.
your how being wet doesn't necessarily mean you want sex. It could mean just beginning of a whole lot of other things. How your body is way more complicated in its responses than I've ever thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's fascinating to me now. At one time,
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that it was maybe fascinating to me, 40 years ago, but really 40 years ago, mostly what my erection was a demand. It was, or it I wasn't thinking about things. It was just like, oh, I'm horny, and you're horny,
Mm-hmm.
and are you? I hope you're horny, and I have no clue about what to do if you're not, except masturbate and go for a walk by myself
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know what to do with this.
Mm.
I think what you like. I know that for me to be interested in your as a woman in your reproductive and sexual health was it felt like work. Now I also know that I was interested in that work. I mean, I had girlfriends who actually put the Boston Women's Health Collective manual in front of me, to the diagram of the all the women's working parts, and and said, you need to read this. And I was open enough to read that and go, wow, like there's lots of good stuff here. Like, so if you're a young man and you're listening to this, I mean, there's a lot of good information out there, and I think what I've been remiss about is sharing some of that with other men, um,
Mm.
because it certainly helped me not only to get to what I thought I wanted at the time, which was that she would have sex with me, but that I got to understand a little bit more about this person who is really different from me,
Mm-hmm.
responds to the world different. The world responds to her differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the things that I take for granted, she can't. Um, and me
Mm-hmm.
expecting her to be the way I am doesn't work very long.
Yeah, well, it would serve every man to understand and know. I actually think a lot of women don't even know the four phases of the menstrual cycle, and that's a month.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that just keeps on repeating for, 30 or 40 years. She has that cycle monthly. And if you understand each phase, that can go a long way towards understanding. Like you call it work to understand her body. What do you think she's going through?
Well, that's the other part of it is like, to me, it was like this. I mean, I really was interested as a young man. Like I was really interested. Like, wow, what's happening, and
Hmm.
why does it happen this way? And I think that was a good thing. So if you're a young man listening to this, I would encourage you to, if you are with a girlfriend or with your wife, is to actually like pay attention and talk to her and be interested in
Go
these
look it up.
four. Go
That's
look it
hot.
up. Yeah, go look it up. Go look it up, and then start just being there at those
Hmm.
different times because they're she's going through different things. Those every week is something different for her,
Hmm.
and for me, I have a friend, wonderful man, but he keeps expecting his wife of a long time to kind of be very much like him.
Hmm.
Like, okay, he accepts that she's different, but inside of him there's still this like, you know if she would only do this thing here, then she would be more logical and rational and all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's not what she gives to you. Like, what she brings to you in your
Hmm.
life is all the stuff that you're not.
Hmm.
And if you can kind of get sensitive to that, then, or because then it starts to be fun. Then it's like, wow, what's going to happen? What kind of gifts will come my way that that aren't planned, that are just this kind of, and there is a pattern, like as you said, there's this monthly pattern, and she may not even
Hmm.
be, lots of women I talk to are not aware of their own cycle that way.
Hmm.
So guys, she really is this, as Melissa has said, this island that is waiting to be explored and known in a different way than she's ever been known. I think that's the really
Hmm.
interesting thing. So to go back to the 4B thing, I mean, that was a reaction to a very traditional Korean society where women were basically there for sex, there to raise children, there to look after the home, and
Hmm.
some women organized because they needed to step, they felt the need to step out of that and to do that in a strong way. And I have yet to talk to a woman who hasn't felt, even in what seems to be a very much more liberal North American culture, hasn't felt some of those expectations.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and as much as paying attention and learning about her, how her body opens and works, is a beautiful thing. So is getting to know how her body has been closed by the kind of expectations that the culture puts on them, that we put on them. Even if
Hmm.
you're a wonderful man, you're still, we grow up in this culture. There's lots of beautiful things about all of those things, but when they become an expectation, that there's, at least that's what I've observed, is that there's closing.
Yeah.
And and then we become involuntarily celibate and we just rail against the world.
I think the answer to a lot of it is playfulness. Um, don't take a lot of it so personally and be genuinely curious.
Mm-hmm.
Like genuinely curious, not curious so that there's, some action that's performed because you asked a question. It's like be genuinely curious. You're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to, this came up earlier when you were talking about, what we can do as men. Um, it's this feeling of confidence. Like so many of us men really don't have confidence. Um, I mean, I felt it tonight in a conversation. Oh, here I'm going to start trying to protect myself because I'm feeling lack of confidence, and that's not going to get
Mm,
me anywhere here. So just take a breath and just know that it's not about getting it perfect. It's about being willing to step up.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
uh, as you said, like try an adventure. It doesn't have to be anything grand. Try it, and lots of them will fail. That's okay. Just keep
Lots of them
going.
won't. Mm-hmm.
Lots of them won't. Even if only a few of them won't, it'll feel so good that you'll be inspired to.
I don't know any woman that wouldn't love to just like for a man to say, okay, put on some jeans and some boots. I'm taking you up the mountain in my truck. Or, we're gonna go like I'm gonna like bring a jacket. I've got a blanket. We're gonna go sit on the beach
Mhm.
without any expectation. Oh my goodness. Like every woman would be if unless they're mean, they would love
Well,
that.
yeah, but there's also lots of women who aren't mean, but who have got hurts, scars, and so my
Yeah, but
experience
if you
isn't.
have no intention of, bringing her into some unsafe experience and you ask her and she says no, then she's got some real hurts and scars.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's a simple, and I'm not talking about just a stranger, like a woman stranger. I mean like your woman. You know, like your woman, and you're feeling like you're not connecting. Just like when I was talking to I think she's 75-year-old lady, and she's like, "Oh, don't need a man. I don't want another man. I'm done with men." And then I said, "Not even for an adventure?" You know, like that's what I love about being in a partnership is those little adventures that he takes me on.
Hmm.
Gets me out of my responsibilities, and I get to feel like safe and taken care of and adventurous. And because I can't do that for myself. I
Hmm.
can't take like I can't take myself up the mountain. I don't know how to drive up the mountain.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she said, actually, I never thought about that, but that is the one thing that I miss about my
Hmm.
relationship. So,
Do you want to bring it back to anything that you started with the death of your sister and
mm,
how?
I guess I just uh, would like to convey how important it is to care about your sexual health and who you're having sex with, and just be a good person. Be a good person to yourself, especially.
Okay. Thank you very much, Melissa.
Thanks, Hans.
And I'm the Reverend Hans Peter Meyer, and I've been talking with Melissa Bloxham. And this is in a series of conversations called Men and Women Talking About Sex and Love. And I hope you heard something here that was useful. If you've got questions, please message me. Um, Thanks for listening. There's lots more in the podcast. Melissa's been a guest several years ago. She was a frequent contributor. We had some great conversations along a similar lines, and it's been great having you back, Melissa. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye
Have a
bye.
good night. Bye.